Hi there guys, I'm Nikhil from Notion Hub and this is the camera review of OnePlus 11. This one comes with a triple camera setup on the rear with a 50 megapixel primary camera with Sony IMX890 sensor with optical image stabilization. That's followed by a 48 megapixel ultra wide angle camera with Sony IMX581 sensor. And finally, we have another 32 megapixel camera with Sony IMX709 sensor, which also comes with telephoto lens, which offers us 2x optical zoom. For selfies, we get a 16 megapixel camera. Now this is how the camera user interface looks like. It is pretty similar to other phones in the same brand. Now these are some sample shots. First I'll start off with the selfies. Color reproduction is pretty good and the colors look close to reality and skin tones look good. It's close to reality. Dynamic range and exposure control are pretty good. Now these are some portrait selfies. Edge detection is pretty good, color reproduction and skin tones look pretty good. Now these are some selfies taken in low lighting conditions. Color reproduction is pretty good. As these selfies are taken in low lighting conditions, they're not too sharp and you can find grains, but that's to be expected. Now these are some selfies taken with the night mode. Selfies with night mode are decent. There isn't much difference compared to the regular selfies. Now this is a sample footage from the front-facing camera. So guys, this is a sample footage recorded using the front-facing camera of OnePlus 11 at 1080p resolution. By the way, audio is from the phone itself and stabilization is also... Okay, I was just talking some nonsense. Anyway, audio is from the phone itself and check out the stabilization and noise cancellation offered by the phone and let me know how it sounds. With that said, I'll be just walking around. By the way, there is another stable mode on this phone which I'll be previewing next, so it should be much better in terms of stabilization, but the footage might be cropped a little. Footage is pretty stable, color reproduction is good, image is pretty sharp, exposure control and dynamic range are very well managed. On this phone we also have the front camera ultra stable mode. Now this is a sample footage recorded with the ultra steady feature turned on, and just from initial impressions, just by looking at the preview I can tell that the footage is much more stable and obviously the footage is cropped as well. By the way, we can also record video with a background blur effect which I'll be previewing next, and once again audio is from the phone itself, and so check out the stabilization and noise cancellation offered by the phone. Now on this phone we also have front camera portrait video. Now this is a sample footage recorded using the front facing camera with the background blur effect, and at least right now in the preview I can see that the background is being blurred. Obviously edge detection won't be perfect, but still it's pretty good for something that comes out right out of the box. With that said, I'll be just walking around. Next, we also have the dual video mode where we can record video with both the front and rear cameras at the same time. Now this is a sample footage for the dual view mode where we can record video with both the front and rear cameras at the same time, and we can also switch between the rear cameras while recording the video, which is a pretty good feature. This is another format or another layout that we can use while we are using the dual video feature, and just in case if you are wondering, we can also switch the positions of both the front and rear cameras. And there is the third layout, which just so happens to be this. So this is the dual view feature. I know that's nice. Now these are some sample shots from the rear camera. These pictures have good exposure control and good dynamic range. Colors look vivid and they are great to look at. As for the color temperature, it is slightly to the cooler side. Now these are some pictures taken with the wide angle camera. Exposure control and dynamic range are pretty good. Color reproduction is good and the colors are close to reality. As for the color temperature, it is slightly on the cooler side. Now these are some macro shots. Now these are some macro shots, they look good and the color reproduction is pretty accurate. Now these are some portrait shots. Edge detection is pretty good, dynamic range and exposure control are decent. Sharpness is also pretty good. Color reproduction is good and the colors look pretty close to reality. Now these are some pictures taken in low lighting conditions. In low lighting conditions, this phone does a pretty good job. Images are slightly on the softer side, that's to be expected, but the color reproduction and the sharpness looks pretty decent. As for the colors, they are slightly to the cooler side. In complete darkness, if you take pictures with a flash, they look much better, colors are pretty accurate, close to reality, and the sharpness is also pretty good. Now these are some pictures taken in low lighting conditions with the night mode. Overall images taken with the night mode look much brighter and sharper than the regular auto mode. As for images taken in indoor lighting conditions, night mode makes the pictures look brighter and sharper. Now for the video department, this is a sample footage recorded in 1080p resolution at 30fps. This phone offers stabilization and it looks pretty good. Exposure control and dynamic range are decent. Color reproduction is pretty good and the colors are close to accurate colors. Now this is a sample footage recorded using the wide-angle camera. This one also offers stabilization with the wide-angle camera, so the footage looks pretty good. Exposure control and dynamic range are good. Color reproduction is pretty good and the colors are pretty accurate. Next, we also have a dedicated super stable mode on this phone, where the footage is much more stabilized. Footage looks pretty similar to the previous footage, but it looks much more stable. Next, we can also record video in 4K resolution. Footage looks pretty stable, exposure control and dynamic range are nice, color reproduction is also pretty good. Colors look pretty close to reality. Next, we can also record video in 8K resolution on this phone. And here's the sample footage downscaled to 1080p. Footage is pretty stable, exposure control and dynamic range are nice, color reproduction is also pretty good. Now, just like any other phone out there, we also have slow motion on this phone, and here's the sample footage. So guys, what do you think about the camera performance of this phone? Do let me know by commenting below this video. With that said, this is Nikhil signing off. See you in my next video.